Without further ado, I'd like to introduce this week's speaker, Dr. Arlen Myers. Tell us what you're going to be talking about today, Arlen.
I'm going to talk about how to close the med tech doctor gaps.
Great. Shall we dive in? Do you want to bring up
Yeah,
the slide?
um, and just we want this to be sort of conversational, and the reason that I mean, there's several people here that I either work with or for um, as an advisor, consultant, et cetera. So the issue that we're going to discuss has to do with something that we've talked about on these meetings before, and that is um, how do we close the healthcare professional, technologist, data scientist gaps? And how do we basically collaborate? And why is that important? And secondly, if you're a healthcare professional um, and you're interested in a non-clinical role, either to supplement your practice or to replace your practice in a different career path, how do you do that? Because people have been, these we said before, a bunch of doctors don't want to see patients anymore, but they can't just sit in a sofa and watch TV all day long. So they got to do something, and they want to get in the game. So how do you collaborate with folks like you? And I'm open, and so I want this to be an open conversation. And put stuff in the chat, and raise your hand, and if just interrupt us, and we can take it. So,
Okay.
um, without further ado,
Well, before you dive into your presentation, just give us the 50-cent version of your background and how you got to where you are now, because I
all
think
right.
that's
So
really important setup.
the headline is first career 40 years as an academic ENT surgeon at the University of Colorado. Second career, an accidental med tech entrepreneur. Third career, an accidental international nonprofit innovation ecosystem CEO. Um, and I don't know what the fourth career is going to be, but I'm sure I don't know how to do that either when I start. So that's the basic idea. So bottom line, traditional academic background, fell into a bunch of stuff that I didn't know how to do, and here I am.
Okay. And so the nut that you want to crack is the gap between the healthcare providers and medtech and the collaboration between doctors and medtech. No?
Well, actually, the gap that I want to close is, or the transformation that I'm trying to catalyze is the transition from sick care to healthcare, and through the deployment of innovation internationally. And an element of that is an open innovation ecosystem that plays nice together instead of siloing and all the stuff we're going to talk about. So I think a critical element of making that transition, whether it's incorporating artificial intelligence into what we do, to interprofessional competencies, to transdisciplinary team building, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we're going to talk about. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve at this moment. And I'm pretty involved, obviously, in medical education, specifically as it involves healthcare innovation and entrepreneurship around the world.
And tell us the name of your association.
The Society of Physician Entrepreneurs, and
Mhm.
SOPE, SOPE. And if you're interested, it's an open network. Anybody on this call can join. And it's at sopenet.org.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see if we can get to the sharing part. Okay, so can you guys, everybody can see this, right? All right. So, okay, so how do we close the healthcare professional, artificial intelligence, computer science, and I include bioengineers in this too, because they're part of this thing. And how do we change? How do we close the gaps? Um, so I'm going to sort of get to the bottom line, and that is that I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about, and then I just the way I want to do this is I'm going to just tee up some of these topics, and then sort of take each one and get some input from the group as to whether I'm full of soup or what have you
Oh,
seen or whatever. Um, so I think the main barriers are these, and I line them all up, the 6 C's or whatever you want to call it. So I think the main barriers have to do with the different cultures of, uh, in this case, doctors. But when I say doctors, I mean any healthcare professional. So the main culture of medicine, the competencies of the players. In other words, what do doctors know how to do versus med tech entrepreneurs or service providers or vendors or anybody else that's in the game. How are the ecosystems or the communities different? And what implication does that have for interdisciplinary cross-functional team building? And it could be intra-professional. For example, doctors working with nurses, working with pharmacists, working with other healthcare professionals. And I'm sure our profession is not the only one that's privy to turf wars and people not playing nice with each other. And then how do you get one ecosystem like the group on this call to play with healthcare professionals? What are the mechanisms to connect the dots between these various entities? What are the communication problems so that we can speak, we can have a, we can be bilingual without an accent? I mean, how do you speak med tech to a doctor? How does a doctor speak data science to a data scientist, et cetera, et cetera? And then one that seems to rear its ugly head has to do with, and particularly in terms of finding a non-clinical role, compensation. In other words, how am I going to get paid to do this? And we can talk about, and we'll talk about these various issues. So the first one I want to talk about is, so first of all, let me just stop there. And what does anybody else have other things that they think are major barriers to collaboration?
Just awareness.
I would,
Go ahead.
I would,
Politics.
what do you-
Politics.
yeah, in the line of politics, I would say change. Just to keep with your C theme, that
Yeah.
things are changing rather rapidly right now, politically, economically, technologically, socially. And I think the rate of change is making a lot of people hesitant to take the next decisive action, whether it's to hire a consultant or to launch a product or to do kind of afraid of their own shadow right now. That's all I'm going to say.
The other thing I would like to mention is data confidentiality as well, the regulation. With data confidentiality regulations being different in different countries and stuff like that, you can't really freely let the information flow between partners to come to different solutions and stuff like that. So you have to really look at a very regulated environment in different countries. But anyways, that's my little.
Michelle, you want to just briefly introduce yourself and give us your 2 cents?
Yes, doctor. So, hi, my name is Michelle McCory. I'm at the foundational stages of a company called All Wellness Alliance. My mission is similar to what Dr. Myers had mentioned. I'm trying to kind of decentralize healthcare, bring, in terms with old terminology, West meets East type of modalities together in a complementary fashion. So I do business to business development I've got some great opportunities already, and I'm just in the formative stages. My goal is to create access and awareness to complementary modalities, integrative complementary modalities. There's one in particular I'm working on that gives an entrepreneurial opportunity to open healthcare clinics surrounding an imaging device that's proprietary. That's been my main focus, but I have other partnerships as well. I have learned so much. I'm not a clinician myself, but there are so many things out there that are effective. I'm developing a partnership with a biotech science company, so I'll be consulting with them. So that's what I do. In a very quick nutshell, there's a lot more to it. I'm going to add another C word to the main issues, and that would be competition. You know, Dr. Myers, you mentioned de-siloing, and that's part of the mission of my company as well. There's, you know, coming from the corporate medical device and pharma world, you know, we're the best, mine's the best, it's all mine. And that's linked in with collaboration, another C word, that I believe is another issue. So I'll just add those two on there from my personal perspective. And walls need to be broken down. And I want to look at the greater good of wellness for all. So
Good.
that's my comment.
Great. Thanks for your comment. Is it George or Jorge or who else has their hand up? George? Yeah.
George.
What are your thoughts?
Well, my business is product development, so I've worked with many physician entrepreneurs over the years. I am a member of SOPE, which I appreciate very much. And I think one of the things that I find, we say in our industry that, and please, I'm not here to offend anybody, doctors are not great business people. And what I mean by that is there's a disparity in, I don't even want to say education. It's not really classic education. It's understanding business. Michelle mentioned competition, getting products to market. It's a whole different world from the physician world. And that there's a big kind of disparity between, I want to call it experience, or business experience, startup experience, that sort of thing.
All right. So we constantly hear this refrain, doctors are lousy business people. And of course, as you can imagine, it drives me absolutely crazy because I think it's total BS.
Apologies.
No, I mean, I'm glad you brought it up. So my take on this is a couple things. Well, anyway, so let me, before I get into this, because I'll go deep in the weeds in this. Lek, do you have some other comments you want to make?
Yeah, I really had to find my C, and that's country. Like in the Netherlands, it was recognized long ago that there was a gap between the medical and the engineering world. So they invented a new bachelor and master study called clinical technology or technical medicine. And that's a pretty advanced study that's really in between. So those people should make a bridge between engineering and medicine. And it actually works, only, of course, they're not, they get a medical certification, so they're allowed to do procedures, and they can talk the same speech as doctors and physicians. But all the while, they're not completely taken seriously because they're not to the level of physicians and they're not to the level of engineers. So they have they have hard work to make a place for themselves, but they actually have added value for both. And that's my C, country. There are countries who recognize this and try to how do you say it? Try to solve it this way and duplicate it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the Copenhagen Business School, they have a master's in biomedical engineering and biomedical entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
there are several There are
There are
several
more,
countries.
sorry,
Yeah.
you first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Now, there's biomedical engineering.
Yeah,
I guess that's more engineering with a biomedical twist.
right.
And
Well,
it's so broad that you can hardly ever level to a good engineer or a good physician.
right. So is anyone on this call a biomedical engineer? You are. Okay. Paul, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I was looking at your list and scratching my no hair head to find a C, but I got an A, right? I think awareness and accessibility for patients, and I say this because I want to do a shout out for Kishore on the call here, right? Um, Leveraging AI tremendously with Protexa to increase access to patients. There's a lot of intelligence that is possible bringing in what he's doing from both a software and a device perspective. And I think that's going to be a huge trend. As much as prolific as medical care is, it's amazing the gaps in the system. At least I'm just talking from the US, right? So I think AI has a tremendous opportunity to bring in efficiencies, bring in higher quality of care, but also make it accessible. That's my
All
comment.
right. So Kishore, just briefly, do you want to tell people your background and sort of chime in on this?
Yeah, sure. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a healthcare expert like so many here on this panel. Uh, my background is in simulation modeling in nuclear submarines, where data was paramount, where it had to be as close to real time as you can possibly get it. The crew being obviously under pressure, just like the physicians are on the front line. I know, like Dr. Harvey mentioned, the ER department. So the crew in a nuclear submarine are under pressure like ER physicians or physicians on the front line. But how do you get them to capture the data that is so important without burdening them and without causing them to think differently or cognitively differently than they've been trained into? So we came up with a unique approach that we used in the nuclear submarines to capture literally the data by touching or tapping. And that would be at the binary level, a 1 or a 0. And then allow the computers, all the great algorithms and engineers around, to go ahead and run the algorithms, run the reports for the powers to be to make the right decisions. No different in healthcare, except now you need that data for driving AI models. And what I see is that a lot of companies are going down these LLM models and all sorts of different rabbit holes when there are solutions that can actually create the data for them right up front. And at the same time, because it's the anatomy, and that's why I mentioned right at the top of this call, that we basically digitize the human anatomy, give that empowerment to the patients. Allow the patients to also engage in their healthcare. There's a lot of research out there that says that the more engaged the patients are, the more likely they are to follow the prescriptions or the care, the care delivery. So that's kind of where we're coming from. It's a slightly different angle. And then according to the, we're all entrepreneurs and trying to buck the system, you might say. And what I've also seen from the outside into the healthcare is trying to change the healthcare system within is an extremely difficult thing to do. It's an uphill battle, especially if you're going with a lot of people, especially in the C-suite even, that do not want to change the status quo. And innovation is going to be, I believe, from the outside or in parallel. And I could probably add another C onto this one as well, if you want, Arlene. It's cash. Because to also generate these innovation, you not only need great communities, teams, collaboration, all these other things that people have mentioned, but you also need a certain level of resources
to really drive home and do R&D to see what fits best. So that's kind of where I come from, and a little bit about the background. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so we've referred to cash collaborators and customers before, and that's, a whole bunch of things. So let me just back up a minute. This issue of, doctors are lousy business people drives me a little crazy. First of all, I don't know what that means, business person. So does that mean you're a lousy investor? Does it mean that you don't know anything about how to run anything? Does it mean in terms of entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship that you had no clue how to get anything to a patient? I don't know what that means. And the history of medicine is replete with doctors who've created, basically changed the world things. Not the least of which, for example, clean water, John Snow with the cholera epidemic in London. I mean, there are lots, the list is endless of doctors that have created stuff that have literally changed medicine. I think the other thing I want to address is that, and what about all the people in private practice? Now, admittedly, private practices have shrunk, but I was in private practice, and you have to run a business if you're going to stay in private practice. So I disagree with that. And I think there's a lot of people in private practice, namely about 300,000, 350,000 of the roughly 1.2 million practicing physicians in the United States. So I could go on and on and on, but the final point I want to make is that this issue of doctors not doing well practicing the business of medicine results from the fact, and I agree that's true, it's one of the things we're trying to change. But the fact is that you don't get into medical school because you have an entrepreneurial mindset. You get into medical school because you are a conformist and play by the rules. And the same thing is true with engineers. And the same thing is true, I would imagine, with PhD biochemists. It's the culture chooses certain people and does not value innovation. Now, you could say, well, hey, wait a minute, I thought academic medical centers were like the source of innovation. I disagree with that. I think they're the source of inventions and discoveries, which are, as we know, very different than getting an idea to a patient or commercializing. So that's my 2 cents on this, and we could get into a separate conversation.
No, just if I could add one quickly. First of all, I appreciate. I do think we need a little more nuanced discussion about this. You're correct. Innovation does come from the bedside. We say that all the time. And so the technologies are certainly coming out. I think it's really this disconnect between the technologies and then getting a product to commercialization is almost like a different study, let's say, or a different area of the business. And since that's where I live, that's kind of high on my list of things.
Okay. So the next, and I want to go through these relative, because I want to get to some solutions. I mean, this call is supposed to be about, okay, what do we do about this? Not bitch and moan and whine and, oh, there are a lot of barriers and all that. So let's just kind of tick them off. One, so we talked about, fairly extensively the different cultures of the different domains. Naturally, that results in different competencies, knowledge, skills, abilities, attitudes, teamwork, mindsets, that kind of stuff, which is part and parcel of the culture that you're in. As we said, biomedical engineers have a different mindset than clinicians and data scientists, in my experience. Actually, I think the main difference in the mindsets has to do with their tolerance for risk. And that, I mean, there's a lot to that, but, obviously physicians have a lot less tolerance for risk. Entrepreneurs, it's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, maybe you would say. Engineers are sort of somewhere, again, they don't have risk for outside the specs, but they're willing to kind of do stuff, that kind of thing. I think the community and the team building, Harvey thinks that ER doctors are risk takers. So Harvey, you can chime in on that, but let me just add that this notion that I just mentioned that doctors are not risk takers actually isn't true. And I would add that surgeons many times are risk takers. I'm a surgeon. So Harvey, why don't you chime in on ER doctors as risk takers?
Yeah, it's I jokingly say it's like the chicken or the egg. What got you into emergency medicine? Is it the adrenaline? Is it the risk? Is it some part of your genes? Is it your entrepreneur spirit? Biasly, as an ER doctor, I go around and biasly I see a lot of entrepreneurs out there, and I look under the hood. And I'm like, huh, ER doctor. So and then I talk to them, why are you doing it? They're like, and to me, when they talk to me, they're like, yeah, I just enjoy the adrenaline. I'm risk averse. And I'm more likely to just jump right in, as opposed to some other professions that are and I noticed that they're not in that mix. So
You mean they're more risk tolerant,
yeah,
not risk of, right?
yeah.
Well, I would add that, there's this other thing where how come so many ER doctors are, quote, entrepreneurs? And I would say, first of all, anybody can do this because I get medical students, and maybe you do, that say, hey, should I go into ER medicine if I want to be an entrepreneur? And I said, no, you could, but that's not the main reason you would do it. I mean, anybody can do this. And it really has to do with the mindset and all that other stuff we're talking about. But more importantly, I think it has to do with two other things. One is you guys are like airplane pilots. You work 3 shifts, 12 hours, and then you get like a week and a half or 2 months off, and then you come back. And so you have time to do stuff. Now, maybe I'm being unkind to you, but Harvey and I are friends and have been for a long time. But the point is that you have the wiggle room to do this stuff, on the off shift hours. And I don't know, you work 36 hours on and 3 days off. It's like being an airline pilot. So you have the time to do this. The second is that with the transformation of inpatient to outpatient and all the technology supporting it, you are used, for example, in COVID, ER docs were rapidly recruited to deal with telemedicine and digital health access during COVID because they were used to triaging, they were used to rapid evaluation, they were used to turfing patients to one place or another and treating them on the spot. That carried over, in my opinion, now that COVID has passed-ish, so that a lot of docs, particularly those that are looking for non-clinical roles, are emergency room doctors because they have that background of dealing with that kind of patient presentation, particularly as it relates to AI. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I do, and you're right. And in the shifts, not everybody's there all the time. So on your night shift at 2 in the morning, 2 to 4, it may be null, and then you have nothing to do. So obviously, you're going to be working on your project. So it gives you that flexibility.
Right. Okay. So do people have some questions? I noticed that there's some stuff in the Q&A. Does somebody want to ask a question or raise their hand, or we'll just keep going if you don't. Anyway. All right, so then the next has to do with the connections. In other words, the networks. So all of us have internal and external networks. The problem is that they're siloed and they're restrictive. And most doctors have terrible networks. And the ones that they do have are internal. If you're a neurosurgeon, you know a bunch of neurosurgeons, and they're probably people that work at your hospital or in your professional association. But you don't know a whole lot of techies. You don't know a whole lot of people that work in aerospace. You don't know investors. You don't know this and that. So I think part of the problem has to do with the connections and the networking apparatus that each of us have. And the point has been brought up that sick care cannot be fixed from inside. It has to be fixed outside in, inside out, which is why we're having this call and why it's so important to have these cross-disciplinary and cross-functional collaborations. And by cross-functional, I mean engineering, sales and marketing, finance, product development, a supply chain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are communications. In other words, how do we talk to each other? And platforms that we use to communicate. And an example is this call. I mean, in the past, most of these calls have been with product developers and vendors and service providers, but very few healthcare professionals. So hopefully it will be an incentive or a motivation to kind of move the needle and change that so that we get some sort of communication platform where we get to know each other, we get to trust each other, we get to figure out who's doing what, how do we get in touch with you? Is this something that you're interested in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How do we learn from each other? That kind of stuff.
Arlen, this is actually why I invited you just to be here today. And Harvey, I'd ask you, if Arlen were to do these weekly for soap, do you think that would add value to the membership? Where some of our guests here, the contract manufacturer, the product developer, the packaging expert, the reimbursement person, were your guests.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, literally, that's what Arlen just said. Is we're in our own silos. We're in our own world, in our doctor world, in our ER world. You know, being an ER doctor, I get to meet all the different specialists when I call them down to the ER to consult. So I get that feeling. But the GI doctor really doesn't know a lot of the other specialists because they don't really talk to them unless it's maybe a consult here and there. But to that point, this would be of value to doctors. And then vice versa. You guys may want X, Y, and Z specialty or understanding. I'm really big on how to combine AI and healthcare, you know, and things like that. So then we're all together collectively. It takes a village. So I would agree.
Okay.
I think really what we need here is some kind of Arlen chat, a chant to encourage him to. So if you'll all join me, Arlen, Arlen, Arlen.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
I've been telling him I'm gonna convert him to a digital twin, and then I could just invite his digital twin
Yeah,
when he
right.
can't
Just
attend.
make an avatar and just right.
Yeah, and we have Arlen.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good. I mean, and we kind of do. I mean, we do that, Joe. It's not an official titled office hours, but we do have several other office hour platforms where we participate.
But
For example, in artificial
folks like
intelligence.
my folks aren't on those.
Excuse me?
People like Jorg and Andre aren't in those office hours to be available to answer questions.
Right. So I'm putting out a pitch that if you are on this call and you want to be part of those office hours, you absolutely positively get in touch with me and I'll include you. I'll make you part of those. I mean, none of us want to reinvent the wheel. And we only have so much time during the week to do this. But I'm just looking for a cross collaboration, you know, and everybody can't show up at the same time, Pacific time, Europe, whatever. So I think the more of these, your point is well taken, Joe, and I appreciate it. And we're moving in that direction. Now, maybe I'll spin it out and try it, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, if I were to set one of those things up that was health, you know, would people on this call come in addition to this one? I don't know. You never know until you try. Any thoughts? Michelle wants to be included. Yay. Okay. So Michelle, send me a note. And I'll put my email address on here.
That's about what I was going to ask. Put your email address in there for us.
I would love to be included, but I guess the question is how are you getting a lot of docs into those things? Because their schedules are so restrictive usually, the doctor's schedule.
Yeah, actually, we do, and particularly another example. Well, actually, I can just I'll put them down here. The next one that I'll tell you about is MI10. It's an AI office hours. And there's also one from the American Board of Artificial Intelligence in Medicine, which also has a weekly office hours. And I will tell you, because Harvey's very active in that, I participated as well. We typically get about 50 or 60 people to that every week. And I'd say, and Harvey, correct me if I'm wrong, half, maybe half, are practicing clinicians interested in informatics and AI in all realms, drug discovery, med tech, care delivery, you name it. It's not just AI stuff. Harvey, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'll add, it's actually nice because we're also getting international people coming, so we're able to get different perspectives. And then the nice thing, as you guys know, being able to get the different parts of even the United States, hearing the different angles and culture, it's really interesting and helpful.
Okay, and then there's the AI Med Conference, which is an international conference. This year is going to be held in San Diego in November. And again, it's an AI ecosystem. Service providers, investors, entrepreneurs, healthcare professionals, techies, education people, business people, you name it. So my point is that if we look at these, with the exception of the bottom one, compensation, which we'll get to in a minute, if you look at all these other things, so what's the solution? I think the solution is to get together in the same room and start developing and exchanging knowledge, developing trust, figure out how mutual self-interest can benefit each other. I mean, this goes back to Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. The single most important motivator of people is self-interest. And that translates into economic well-being. I mean, this goes back to 1776 when it was published. So that's the deal. And I think that in terms of the next steps, create awareness, get comfortable with each other, begin to learn each other's language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that kind of stuff. It's ecosystems. It's how do you build it? The other point that I want to make is this has to do with the compensation conversation. And I'm interested in what folks think, because what I run into personally and in talking about this with other people is, well, how do I get paid to do this? That is from the perspective of the healthcare professional / doctor that wants to consult to a med tech company or become part of the company. And typically the line of succession has to do with your first of all, you may just be an influencer, or you may be somebody who's a key opinion leader, subject matter expert for the given company. And you're out there doing your deal and writing a bunch of stuff, and people know who you are, and you're talking about stuff, whether directly or indirectly, whether you're actually standing up for the product or just talking about the problem to create awareness of the problem because that's what your company is trying to solve. There is such a thing as what I call a hood ornament, which is a key opinion leader who signs on with a company and basically he gets his or her picture put on a website for the product, but they really don't do anything. They're just there creating a halo effect. And they're a hood ornament. They really don't add all that much value, in my opinion, but maybe the person who hired them thinks so. Then when you go up the food chain, then you become an advisor, consultant, maybe you're a member of the management team. You may be on the board of directors, you may be a direct investor, or you may be something else. So each of those comes with a different compensation issue. And physicians and doctors think, first of all, you understand the business model, the revenue model for doctors is, I just show up and get paid. I don't get well, you actually don't get paid. You show up and you try to get paid. You got to throw out a rigmarole to get paid. But you don't get paid for performance. That's the basic idea. In this world of consulting, advising, technology, commercialization, the mindset is you get paid for performance. And that's a hard thing for people to translate. So the model, the revenue model is different. And the amount you get paid is different. So if you're a neurosurgeon or a fancy ER doc making a lot of money and you decide you want to do clinical stuff, your attitude is, well, I want to make the same amount of money I made as a doctor doing an advisory role with a med tech company. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I'm interested in, from the technologists in the group and the product developers and service providers in the group, how do you approach that? Because both sides have value issues. From the standpoint of the doctor, they feel undervalued because they have MD after their name and you're not paying me enough, whether it's cash or equity. And from the technology person that may potentially hire them, well, we don't know whether you're going to produce anything, particularly if we're a startup. We're not going to pay you unless we get results. And okay, we'll pay you a referral fee. Okay, we'll pay you equity. But then the pushback from the doc is, no, that's not the way I get paid. And that's not what I want to do. So how are you dealing with that conversation?
If I may, it reminds me of a personal anecdote where back in the 70s, somebody came to my father who made house coats, a now defunct category of women's loungewear to wear around the house as they cook and clean. And the guy said, we have this new package where you can do your accounting on a computer. You can, instead of doing T accounts and doing everything by hand. Weeks later, the guy says, Mr. Hage, this is exactly the use case that we're talking about. Will you show other business people how to do this? My father looked around and said, look at all these seamstresses. This is my business. This is what I do. I make house coats. The punchline is this representative was from a company called International Business Machines, and it was the dawn of the PC. And he would tell me, Joey, can you imagine if I didn't have my blinders on and I saw opportunity, what could have been? It's a story I tell whenever I hear this kind of crossroads of, but that's not what I do. Well, Harvey's an ER doc. He didn't start off as an AI guy, but he's found that he brings great value doing that. So if that inspires, that's, I think, what you're discussing, Arlen.
So, Kishore, are you still with us?
Yeah, I am.
All right. So
definitely.
just for disclosure, so I'm an advisor to Kishore's company. So, and you have other people that are working for you, whatever. So what are you thinking as someone that engaged me or engaging other people? What were you looking for? What happened?
Yeah, from a non-clinician and trying to get clinicians on board, I got to tell you, it's been very, very tough. Right? It's not easy for the reasons that you just mentioned, Arlene. I'm used to making X amount per hour. If I'm going to come and help you, I want that and a little bit more, right? Versus, well, okay, you guys are taking a risk. I'll also take a risk and help you because I believe in what you're doing. Right? So sometimes it works, as well as it doesn't. A lot of times it does not. And so you just move on. You find the next best person. You find who you can, and you try to get to the next stage. And I'm talking from an entrepreneurial side, where companies do not have a lot of cash, if any cash at the beginning, right? And they have to basically bootstrap. When I mean bootstrap, I mean really bootstrap, right? And people have bills and everything to pay. So the engineers are also of the similar mindset as well. As if you think, it's not just the physicians, it's actually a lot of engineers because they're in demand. And they go, well, I can earn so much and so much if I go and work for, Oracle or whoever, right? Then why should I come and work for you? And they want guarantees. So I don't think there's an easy answer, Arlene. It's a really tough spot. You know, yes, you can go down the VC route and try to raise, go down that path, and you got a great idea and raise some money and go down that path. Well, that's not for everyone, that not everybody succeeds in that path either. And it may not be the right thing to do if that's what you really want to try to keep to your philosophy and what you're trying to achieve. So I don't have an answer for you, Ollie. I'm just sharing some of the experiences. We grind through, and somehow we get through.
Stephen, are you still with us, Stephen Flutie?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So, so you set up a platform to match. Basically, it's a dating service. You're matching doctors who want gigs with people who want doctors. So, can you share your experience and just tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, I'll give it to you on the supply on the other side as well. I've created products in the orthopedic space, and when we've gone through the process of trying to figure out what physicians to bring on board or not, you said earlier those ornament pieces like that, like almost like the digital key opinion leaders, and we've actually started to move more away from those because we started to see just they get tied into a certain thing and they do the same thing, and it's kind of they're losing credibility. On the pitching side, what we wanted to do was take a little bit more of a background of who are you, what's your background, what's your training, have you done any type of development before, what's the experience levels there, and then have you done any investments, and then also can you look at a product or procedure or whatever someone is developing with a broader lens other than the lens of this will fit in my practice. And so that's really what we've started to do. And a lot of it, like I've told you before, it really comes from just word of mouth referrals and just the network that we've built out. But when we do the matching side of it, we take the job process. There's a lot of keyword searches in there, and then we go into like the CV to really try to match with the right people. So it's a really fluid process.
And how do you deal with the compensation issue? Or what advice do you give people about the compensation issue?
So we've built a little calculator for them where they can kind of see what their average hourly rate is. I think the compensation is a really tricky conversation. We built the mechanisms for them to be able to safely, properly get paid and not have to worry about 1099s and things like that. We haven't had a lot of conversations around that just because I feel like that's not really our area. We are building data sets around what the average rate is per project or retainer, and really trying to be able to provide some type of AI feedback in that of, hey, this is a little bit low of what you're getting pushed for or you're getting asked to do. This is a little high given your background. So we haven't had a lot of conversations around compensation other than, hey, we've made it very easy for you to actually get compensated for this. A lot of the physicians we talked to during this time never got compensated for any type of investment due diligence or feedback. It was, hey, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Just a couple of observations. I think there's, first of all, this pay by the hour model may work for some people, but for a lot of people, it doesn't. Particularly when you're dealing with a key opinion leader or you're trying to get somebody engaged, like Kishore said, who believes in the thing. But, Michael Jordan didn't make a fortune getting paid by the hour for Nike. They basically leveraged his brand as an endorsement because he was a big shot. And every celebrity endorsement works that way. You don't get paid by the hour. So my point is, and I'm not suggesting I'm a genius, but the phrase is you don't pay genius by the hour. The point is that there are different revenue and compensation models. It could be by the hour. It could be by the project. It could be retainer. It could be finder's fee. It could be combination cash equity. But everybody is going to look at this differently in their time of life. For example, someone who is a senior physician who is a key opinion leader, you offer them options and they could be dead by the time they vest and they could be exercised. So they may not really, on the other hand, they may want that because maybe they have some legacy thing or a trust or whatever they're interested in. I don't know. But it varies. It really varies person to person. Before we leave, there have been some questions. Yes, absolutely, positively. Put your LinkedIn profile in the chat. So if anybody, gets to the point we were talking about before. So yes, put your LinkedIn profile. If anybody wants to connect to everybody else, that's kind of the point of this. Irina wants to know, what's the name of the company that matches clinicians?
Stephen, will you
So,
put that link in there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll throw the
see-
link there. It's called
But-
Pitch Sync. We actually have a live event coming up where we're launching on May 28th. So I'll also put the link to that in there. And Sean, if you would help, you'd help me send that out, that'd be great.
And Arlen, there are some questions there in the Q&A from Susan.
Susan, what's your question?
Do you see it there? I'll read it to you. In order to
yeah.
survive, do you see it?
Let's say, yeah, I got it. In order to survive in private practice, you have to be a risk taker.
And that follows up with the question, when will we be talking about the subject of how to get digital healthcare opportunities? I'll unmute you.
Right. So let me just ask, so how do you do this? Number one, you have to overcome the barriers that we've alluded to. Number one, you have to build a personal brand and a business model canvas. You have to get people to know you, not who you know. Number two, you have to develop the knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies to meet the objectives of what a potential employer wants you to do. Clinical mindset is not the same as an entrepreneurial mindset. Number three, you have to get involved with the right community to begin to network so that you kiss as many frogs as you have to kiss to find the right one. Number four, you have to deliver. You have to be results oriented and be realistic about this conversation. Did I answer the question, Susan?
Yes, you did answer the question, but I think it's also important that people that are in clinical practice, whether it be the ER or primary care or surgery, have a lot to offer because, you know, a clinical company cannot come to a decision that's effective without having a clinician on board with them, as we all know, and it's been said over and over again. So we have a lot of information of value to deliver to.
You're absolutely correct.
And I don't think you should definitely get paid for that, and you should be respected for the knowledge that you have. I mean, you know, with the 30 years of experience like Harvey has in his ER experience, me as a pediatrician, we have a lot to offer. And I think we need to speak about how we can bring that forward and how we can express that information to clinical digital companies. I don't think they know we exist, really, to be honest.
Well, I would take the opposite view. I would say that because doctors like you and me are used to do it, I don't know any doctor who doesn't do stuff for free during their training to take care of patients that don't have any money. We have been enculturated to take care of people regardless of their ability to pay. Now, that's not the reality. But I would say that part of this conversation is a self-inflicted wound. In other words, doctors don't value their own worth, so they don't ask for it. I hear that over and over again. I'm afraid to ask for money.
I don't know if that's true. I'm not afraid to ask for money.
Well, you're not. You're not.
Well, I think
I'm not.
Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody on this call is afraid to ask for money.
Harvey, would you agree?
I'm not afraid to ask for money, but I see your point. I know I get asked to speak a lot, and they want me to donate my speaking time, and I don't, you know.
Right, but you're constantly asked, "Oh, we don't have an honorarium. Oh, we want you to do this. Oh, we can't pay for your travel. Would you mind coming and speaking at the International Conference on International Entrepreneurship? Would you do it?"
Depends. Like I spoke for free at CES.
Right, it depends.
Because it's CES.
It depends, but what I'm saying, we're all used, and there's a good reason for doing something for free.
Yeah.
There are many reasons for doing things for free. But I hear that, you know, I'm afraid, particularly this issue of wage gaps, women, race, I mean, all that stuff, without getting into that. I'm simply saying that I think it's a two-sided coin. And that I think physicians and healthcare professionals undervalue their worth so they're reluctant to negotiate. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Other questions? And actually, we're going to have to, Sean, you're going to have to cut us off when it's time to stop talking. Anybody else have some thoughts?
May I just step in?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Who are we?
This
who
is
are you?
Stephanie.
Oh, hi,
Stephanie
Stephanie.
Grassman. Hi.
Yeah.
I just turned my camera on here. Just a minute. Just comment on this whole thing. The problem is we're no longer in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We're in a highly regulated environment, unfortunately, especially in Europe. And you really need to have millions in order to get a medical device to market. And that's part of the big problem. I mean, if you have a very, very low risk device, risk classification, like a class 1, then maybe you can, squeak by and stuff like that. But I think at the end of the day, you really have to have investors really supporting our idea. You have to have so many interfaces. You have to have so many mindsets. And you really have to have marketing people on board to get there, to the end game.
Right.
It's just one of my thoughts right top off my head. Thanks.
Right. And no, thanks for bringing that up. And my point to that is that if you are a physician or someone in this position looking to help a company or a startup, sometimes the ask is, we want you to help us raise money. It's a very, and sometimes it's a hidden agenda. They'll say, oh no, we just want you to do this, this, and that, but they really want you to raise money. And again, we don't have a lot of time, but that comes with a whole lot of issues, and it's a real it's a real can of worms. Not the least of which is if you're not a regulated, securities agent, you wind up being a finder and wind up on the first page of the New York Times. So there are lots and lots of issues that we could discuss. Okay, well, it's 10:01. I think we're done. I really appreciate everybody's input, and hopefully we can develop this collaboration and make things happen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Myers, for coming and speaking to us today and sharing your thoughts on closing the gap. It's a broad topic, and there's certainly a lot of room for discussion. But I think that the discussion has to start somewhere. So we're glad that you came. Thank you so much. Next week, we are going to have Adam Isaac Ray from Scotland, who is a regulatory consultant and auditor, and he is going to be speaking about the 7 biggest challenges in medtech regulatory. So his perspective on that. And it will be the first week where I'm going to be flying solo. I would like to acknowledge Joe, and by acknowledge, I mean give a round of applause.
Go on.
No, seriously, a round of applause to Joe. I asked him earlier when he started doing this. He said October 2019. Was that correct? And that's a lot of Friday calls under his belt. And he's brought a lot of people together. I think that as we focus this conversation, and we talk about bringing people together and the importance of bringing people together, especially in the age of AI, where human expertise is largely marginalized, and going to become increasingly so. I think that the actual opportunities for human connection and exchange of ideas become more and more relevant.